stopping for the stop sign today.
Plexiderm trial. You'll see why our customers describe Plexiderm with 3 words. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Order right now. We'll pay your shipping. Operators are standing by.
You really need to sleep. You reach for the really good stuff. Sequel Ultra helps you sleep better and longer when you need it most. It's not habit forming and powered by the bigger NyQuil. Sequel Ultra. Really.
Wrong navigation. Hey, Jim.
Elon Musk speaking. What can I do for you?
All right. I got several. Hey, well, it's a good thing that I got Elon Musk because I've got multiple complaints about my car. I really wish he would quit fucking around with the government and focus on getting your cars to the point where you said they were going to be like 7 years ago and they're still not there yet. So.
Well, I fucked up and voted for the wrong people, and now my 401k is down.
I've been meaning to ask you. You still going to retire next year?
No, I have to keep working. I'm taking it in the hand.
You definitely reap what you sow, man.
It's temporary.
It's temporary.
So they tell me.
It's temporary as long as you got a.
The stock market is like your Christmas tree thing that the wind blew it over and you had to strengthen it.
Yeah, it's temporary as long as you got a moron in the Oval Office. You take the best economy in the world and you completely turn it upside down.
What would
goes to show how every single business that moron ran went like bankrupt or failed.
Yeah. I keep saying that about the dog, and then you sent me a picture that Joy got out of the house too. That was hilarious.
Yeah. I knew it was only a matter of time with her, but that's
all right. What's the corrosion question?
I'm trying to think now. You got me distracted with complaining about Trump. Corrosion. Okay, I was looking at the timeline, and I had a note to ask you about 26-week versus 34-week corrosion test. What is your understanding of the lead time?
Well, the corrosion test I just did is the hardest, the longest one. I think I put in there 180 days. What is that? 26 weeks, right?
Okay, so not 34 weeks.
Well, the 34 is I put extra time to get the parts and any setup if we need to build fixturings, right? If they don't go with if they want us to like build fixtures and bloat the 3 tanks with crush, I need time for fixtures. If they allow us to do it unrestrained, just like tied up with bungee cords or rope or stuff like that, then I don't need. that's why I covered for that.
Okay. But that's the fixturing is something that could be done prior to
Yes.
having the tank assemblies, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So
with the math data and all that. Yeah.
Okay, so do you know is 26 weeks assuming like a 5-day a week corrosion test or a 7-day?
They do it 7 days a week. They spray 7 days a week. I believe.
Okay.
But there's a manual spray and an automatic spray. I'm using the manual spray now. I believe it's every day of the week. I'd have to look at the G4U report. Yeah. Trying to. Oh, the other question is that am I responsible to corrosion on all 3 part numbers?
It depends. Are you talking pipe or tank or what?
Tank.
Tank. Unless we're going to get surrogate testing, like we're still going through the DV plan with.
I guess it doesn't really matter because the one tank is in first anyway, right? You have 3 different timelines. I guess let's ask it like that.
I've got 2 different timelines. The second 2 part numbers share the same timeline.
For tanks, I mean.
Yeah. So there's 2. The 46 gallon is the lead program, and then the other 2 tanks are a second timeline.
Right, but we have time. Are you putting all 3 timelines together right now, or you're just focusing on one for the test timing and the equipment timing and all that?
I'm doing all 3 of them. My main focus is on the lead program, being that that's the one that's
Good.
currently.
I don't. I mean,
behind.
we didn't ask the question. So if the lead program is the 46 gallon, whatever, and we put 26 weeks in there for corrosion, they can make a decision like, oh, it's the same tank, it's the same mounting, the same nuts and bolts. We can use surrogate data from the first program, right? But that only makes a difference if we're using all the same suppliers and the same skid plates and metal and straps, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's a high likelihood of that because the design of the part, they're going to be physically different.
Well, for corrosion, it doesn't mean about the design, it means on a vehicle level.
You keep saying that, but I'm going to fight you till the end on that one.
No, I'm talking about if they give me the release, but not do fixtures and just do it against the other ones where they're just standing without compressing and mud or torque. Normally to keep that at the vehicle level, they tend to buy off more and do surrogate data is what I'm getting at, right?
Okay.
So by rights they shouldn't have did that. Like, so they got themselves in order now because Martin went to the meeting because on the fill pipe say if we're getting rid of a bracket, now I got to redo the corrosion test. I have a different supplier and shit, right? And a different hook, right? It's not apples to apples because it's a different stamping, a different weld process.
Yeah.
So they didn't do themselves any favors when they said the corrosion was, or they went down a list surrogate data. I just saw you call the meeting, and basically they fucked up, so now they got to start over. They're at risk. I mean, they'll use some surrogate data still, but not much.
Yeah, it makes it a lot harder, that's for sure.
Yeah, it makes it harder if you cancel the program, and it makes it harder if there's a failure. Just like the guy answering the question, they don't know what they're doing in China. He's asking me, is it constant tension time or not? No. It's even in the pictures. He didn't even go out and look at his own assembly plant or look at drawings to show it's not constant because he's new. He just started. He just got out of college. So, I don't know. It's crazy. Because that's why Mike called the meeting. He wants to go back and say, we can still use surrogate, and then he's going to say, no, too much risk, and then he's going to tell us to do a DB2 or something to help him out, right?
Yeah. Well, we're already doing, like, how we got it now is technically it's going to be a PV1 and a PV2.
Yeah, okay. That's the plan then? Okay. Yeah, because he had all his eggs in that basket, and that's on hold. I don't even know if it's ever going to go into production, the other one. So all this work all that meetings we had, when the program on hold in November or December, Mike can't take the risk now. But yeah, I would not put anything. 26 is the minimum.
Okay.
The 32, I believe, was if I needed to build fixturings, that makes sense, because 26, 36, what is that? What did I have in there? 8 weeks for fixtures? Why, are you trying to pick up 6 or 8 weeks, or?
I'm trying to pick up whatever I can. Like right now, it's looking like the with the current expected delay, which is all Stellantis is, doing. So
right.
It's on them. I'm not so worried about it. But what it's basically doing is it's pushing some of the PV testing, corrosion being the longest. It's ultimately going to push out the PPAP timing past X3, which doesn't meet their requirements being saleable vehicles. So there's going to.
So they're going to have to give us relief, right? They're going to have to say put your timing together for the testing, and the program team will have to go into production without having data or halfway cycle data.
Well, the other thing that I was looking at doing is. Like saying, as soon as we have the straps and heat shield, like the new metallic components, can we test those as standalone components? That way we don't have to wait, a couple months down the line to get the tank
well, yeah, that's
shells.
how we did the LB. That's what I was talking about. They didn't have compressor or nothing, but we put it in a chamber and we sprayed them.
Yeah.
We started as soon as they came. The only thing, like the risk is we got to make sure they're off, they're not soft tooled and they're sourced to the production. Because that's the problem. That's why I said what I said. Stellantis told me to go ahead with testing, and they gave me parts for a company that they ended up desourcing and went with a different company for production.
Yeah, that's no good.
Yeah, and now they're scrambling, and they're like, now I got a quote for 50 or 60 grand or whatever, 100 grand to redo the production parts. This was on the LB, this was on all the programs. They jumped the gun, they sourced a company, and then in the middle of it, they resourced PV level. So I did the corrosion at DB from one company with one material and coating, and then they desourced them and went with another company. And that company says, well, they put in their exception, we're not doing any corrosion testing. And it was too late for me to say, I was already 6 months, 3 months, 4 months in.
Yeah.
So that's why I said on that call, we're not going to do that shit. Besides, now they're in the middle of this and they make it. We asked them over 4 or 6 weeks ago to bring that fucking in, man. They said, "Oh, I'm working on getting that bundle, that status of bundle where we connect to and stuff."
Oh,
he brings it in.
The tank strap change.
Yeah. I remember Dan and us asking for that 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Oh,
now they bring it in, and they're bringing it in, and there's no clearance to put our fucking strap in.
Yeah.
I've seen on the assembly line when there's no clearance for the strap, Russ, they take like this big plastic shin pad,
pry bar.
It's like a shin pan, and they push it over those lines for assembly. So we don't, because there's no way we can design around that and make the strap shorter without hitting that. Because that operator is fishing around to line up those 4 bolts, right?
Right.
And he could hit that line and put a cut in it. So they have to put like a big plastic sleeve over all that during assembly or for the life of the vehicle, so it doesn't gouge into that shit. They just tell us that the other day. Are you fucking kidding me, man?
You should be used to this, man. Like,
Oh my fucking god! You know how many times I brought up about assembly? Dude. These I'm glad Brian chimed in because I was going to tell them the dumbest motherfuckers in the world. Nobody in the history of the world has shipped the tank upside down.
Oh yeah.
What the fuck? On top of that, I didn't have to say it, but I don't know if you know this. We can't ship upside down ever. Do you know why? Besides the module, when our tank is upside down, all the valves are closed.
Valves, yeah.
And well, no, all the valves are closed, and it's a sealed system.
Not venting, yeah.
Just for thermal, there's no venting. So for thermal expansion and contraction, we could pancake a tank or balloon a tank.
Yeah.
If it's sat on a truck somewhere or in a hot area or in a minus 40 area, it would pancake the tank because there's no venting.
Very true.
But these motherfuckers don't know anything. They just, I feel bad for the guys we're working with. They seem like nice guys, Alex, doing that. But their assembly plant is telling them, running them around like dogs on leashes.
Well, they're looking at it from, they're kind of tunnel vision. They don't understand all the functionality. That's what we're here for. Trying to talk some sense into them and stop them from making bad decisions.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. All I know, it's pretty ugly right now everywhere. So it's Friday.
You can thank your boy for that.
It's Friday night. I'm going to take the rest of the weekend off. Talk to you later.
Oh, hey, real quick. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
I sent out this PowerPoint file from Mike.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay. It's pretty simple, I think, but I set up a meeting for you and I to go through it next.
We're gonna go line. We're gonna go line. Yeah, we're gonna go through it line by line. Do I need to look at it before the meeting or what?
Yeah, open it up and just get an idea of what it's asking. It's basically asking for, our understanding from the supplier, what the main purpose, like in like one or two sentences, what the main purpose of the test is, and if we have any questions about it, or if we think it's, a test that we would say it's not worth running because we cover it in simulation.
Is this us asking Mike for support, or is this Mike asking us for support?
Mike asking us for support.
All right. Okay, I'll take a look at it. I couldn't tell when I first opened it. I thought it was maybe you covering your tracks, but it's more Mike asking us for support. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll look at it on the weekend, and
it sounds like something that he's doing with all the suppliers.
Oh, yeah, our suppliers.
Yeah, like
okay.
Not just us.
Oh, it's not related to heavy duty then. It's like a generic form. Okay, I couldn't tell. I looked at it real quick. I'm like, oh, I thought it was because J4U was going away. He wanted to cover his bases on the heavy duties now and make sure we caught the surrogate that wasn't going to work. Okay, this is a whole separate little project.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'll open and look on the weekend, and I'll be ready for the meeting.
All right.
All right, bye. Talk to you later.
Later.
sense that it's very hard to imagine the two sides negotiating anywhere out of it in the near term. I think with the Europeans, with the Mexicans, the Canadians, the other primary trade partners of the United States, there's going to be a very significant effort to see what can be negotiated. With China, there was an immediate response. You're adding 34%, we're adding 34%, and the implications of that, as you saw in the markets all day today, pretty clamorous.
I wonder if I can ask you best and worst case scenario, starting with worst case scenario. If this continues, how does Europe react? How does China react? And where does it leave us?
Worst case scenario, we're in a global recession led by the United States, a full decoupling between the U.S. and the Chinese economies, with corporations that do global business getting hit massively, very significant U.S. inflation, and Trump having to respond to that by blowing out deficits further to ensure that his base is taken care of. And the Europeans stuck between those two models, and with no good options, frankly, hedging away from the United States because the transatlantic relationship is broken, but not being able to align with trust with the Chinese either. And so, I mean, you can find pockets of countries that do comparatively well. You can find some sectors that do comparatively well, but there are really no winners in that worst case scenario.
What about the best case scenario?
Best case scenario was that Trump starts declaring victory with Vietnam and Cambodia, and very quickly moves to larger countries. He loves getting inbound phone calls from global leaders that are saying, please, sir, we want to find a way to engage with you. First, you do that with some smaller countries from the global south that have very little leverage against the Americans. But quickly, you also move then to the Europeans, to the Canadians, the Mexicans, and the Chinese are the big unknown factor there. I'm skeptical that even in the best case, you get to a deal with the Chinese, but you might be able to take the edge off of where we are presently, reduce some of those tariffs with some promises, with some purchases of American goods, that kind of thing, dealing with fentanyl to a greater degree. And then, you will have had an enormous hit to the U.S. economy in a quarter or two, but by the end of the year, things are actually looking a lot more stable for the remainder of the Trump administration. That's probably the best case scenario.
The best case and the worst case don't always align in terms of what that means for Europe and what that means for the U.S. It's not that there's going to be a worst case scenario for all of us. There's another scenario where, and you tell me if I'm wrong about this, where Europe finds new markets and China finds new markets and America gets cut out of the global trading order. Is it possible to find a market to sell goods and to be maybe if not as successful, but successful enough to make it so that America is just not necessary any longer or irrelevant?
Well, obviously Mexico and Canada can't do that because they're so overwhelmingly dependent. So you've got to take that hemispheric piece out of the equation. You've got countries like Japan and South Korea that are really dependent on the United States for security, and so they can have a meeting with the Chinese trade minister, but at some level they're going to do their damnedest to ensure, even if the Americans are hitting them harder and unilaterally, that they don't actually break that relationship. Now, the Europeans, I think, are a much bigger question. They have trade competency, they are a common market, they are significant and they're powerful and they're not nearly as dependent on the United States, and they're angry at the U.S. for other reasons, like America.
correspondent here at Hague, CNBC senior national correspondent Brian Sullivan.
Perhaps Arthur Burns and how he poorly responded to the inflation of the 1970s. But it's hard to imagine, I don't know, a worse situation than this right now. And I think one of the things, J.P. Morgan raised their recession odds to 60%, as you know. What was interesting about that commentary was how they said this change in business sentiment about the policy mix, which is kind of like saying, we thought Trump was on our side, and now it appears as if he ain't here. There's a real feeling of leadership being MIA or AWOL or whatever military term you want to use there, Nicole, which is the president's down in Florida. I believe he's golfing. The Republicans in Congress are probably the one group of people that could stop this, but we don't see them acting with any sense of urgency here to put a stop to these tariffs, and they appear, I don't know, content or otherwise not taking any urgent action to stop this. Remember, the Constitution gives Congress explicit power over tariffs.
Yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating that in another arena, we'll have another sort of generation of people running around with pocket constitutions, right? Making sure that that is still the case as we sort of tumble through this unknown. Steve Leisman, thank you very much for starting us off again. We're grateful.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Joining our conversation, executive editor and New York bureau chief for The Economist, Charlotte Howard, is with us. Also joining us, former Republican Congressman, MSNBC political analyst David Jolly's here, and Michael Linden's here. He served as a senior advisor in the Office of Management and Budget under President Biden. He's now campaign director of the group Families Over Billionaires, which has to be filling a whole lot of steam behind a mission statement like that. Let me start with you. Tell me, Michael, what this week's sort of political events at the beginning of the week, the Cory Booker filibuster, the sweeping rebuke of Trump and Musk in Wisconsin, and the margins narrowing so dramatically in Florida, and then the sort of man-made economic calamity of the last 48 hours.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I mean, this week has been eye-opening, I think, for a lot of people. On this very same day that Donald Trump imposes these massive tax hikes that will largely be paid by working people in this country, his allies in Congress are right now, even as we speak, trying to pass a massive tax cut for mostly wealthy people and billionaires, as the name of my organization suggests. And the mix here of asking wealthy or asking working people and everyday Americans to pay more at the grocery store and imposing this economic crisis while saying to very wealthy people and giant corporations, we're going to give you another tax break. It's just not what anybody in America was asking for, no matter who they voted for. And I think you're starting to see that all over the country. It's an unbelievably toxic mix of both bad economics and horrible politics.
Let's stick with the bad economics first, Charlotte. We put the cover up yesterday. It was informed/prescient. Is there anything that surprises you as the week has turned out to be the worst case scenario economically speaking?
I think what's interesting is I've heard several people describe the market response as a panic. I don't actually view it that way. It seems like a rational response to a completely irrational policy. And I very much agree that this is a bet that seems very odd politically. It's deeply odd economically. I mean, it's a bad reading of recent history. America's economy has been the envy of the world for the past few years. It's a bad reading of basic economics, the goal of going after a completely balanced trade levels with every country in the world. That's not actually a worthy goal in and of itself, right? And so the bet that Donald Trump articulates is about raising revenue, about bringing manufacturing back. If manufacturing were to come back to the United States, that payoff would be not at a large scale and certainly not in a time frame that would benefit Donald Trump himself politically. So there are ways in which both on the substance technically and on the politics, it is, I agree, just very strange. But the market response is completely predictable given the policies that Trump announced.
David Jolly, let me show you something Donald Trump said. He was actually talking about tariffs back in 2018.
Stick with us. Don't believe the crap you see from these people, the fake news. When you're seeing what's happening.
I pulled that when it happened. He was at VFW, he was talking about tariffs, and it seemed so ominous. Important at the time. I mean, I blew up my show and spent the hour asking why doesn't he want his supporters to believe what they're seeing and what they're reading? Why does he want to create his own reality? And I think what we're seeing this week is exactly why. You've got Will Kane on Fox yesterday at this hour said, "What is down?" Megyn Kelly on her show, wherever it is, saying, don't believe me, a multimillionaire herself saying, no, don't believe these silly people. This is a lived reality. The people who are panicking, if it's not the markets, are people who saw their savings evaporate, people who worked their whole life and plan to retire in the next 6 months or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. Now I don't know if they're going to be able to live the life they plan to live in retirement. I mean, this is real catastrophe of the most personal and intimate kind for the American family.
That's right. Nicole, Donald Trump has now had a greater impact on economic uncertainty than COVID did. Think about that. Donald Trump and his decision-making has had a greater impact on economic uncertainty in the United States than COVID did. His approval rating is at a new low for his second term, an all-time low, if you will, for his second term, and the honeymoon is over. And it doesn't matter what some of his friends on conservative media say. To your point, this is now a lived experience. The reason the numbers are as bad as they are is because people are experiencing the anxiety and the economic uncertainty. And honestly, there will be such a latency effect to this, right? We have yet to see kind of corporate America pull back some of their planning for investments or hiring or so forth. But what this immediately does is it forces corporate America to retract some of those plans for hiring or investment. And I think to your point, I love the way you're looking at this, because Donald Trump, look, a large part of his success is that he mastered reaching voters in very simple ways where they are, and he understands that the bulk of politics and electoral politics happens in the low propensity, low information space. Right? A lot of us can talk about policy all day, we can fight over the nuances of it, but most people consume their politics in very small ways. They're worried about their school or their church or their job or their kids or their car. This is an area. Donald Trump's disruption of the American economy and the world economy has shattered that low propensity, low information space. And now all of those people that he was bringing along are saying, wait a minute, I'm not sure what you sold me. The interesting thing here is he should understand that, look, when in his first term, he put all these tariffs on agriculture that affected American agriculture. And what he didn't brag about was he tripled direct subsidies to farmers then as a way to soften the blow. The economic anxiety is only solved now by opening that plant, by expanding jobs, but none of that's happening. And he doesn't really have a plan for it. I mean, I think that's the part that it is talked about openly, but maybe whispered about in some circles. This is not a president that understands the secondary and tertiary effects of what he just did and the need for a long-range plan. If you want to pivot the U.S. economy and re-domesticate industries, you could do that. There's an economic plan to do that. It still comes with a lot of pain, but at least there's a sober way to get there. It's not this. This is Donald Trump and his vanities punching at our economic allies, working out his anger on the world stage, and even the low information, low propensity voters who said last November, I don't like the direction we're going with Biden, I want to give Trump another direction. They're looking at this now saying, this guy's worse than COVID, and his approval ratings are in the tank, and I'm part of the reason, because I don't like where he's taking us.
Well, Michael, I mean, worse than COVID, smartphones were never $1,300 during COVID, and Yahoo's reporting that Wall Street's biggest tech folks are warning that $3,500 iPhones and an economic Armageddon are looming. Let me read from that reporting. The concept of taking the U.S. back to the 1980s manufacturing days with these tariffs is a bad science experiment that in the process will cause an economic Armageddon, in our view, and crush the tech trade, AI revolution, leave an overall industry in the process. The economic pain will be brought by these tariffs. It's hard to describe and could essentially take the U.S. tech industry back a decade. What do you do as someone sort of trying to turn people's fear? I mean, Trump has made a lot of people scared about the price of things. People think hoarding of toilet paper was bad. I mean, everything, toys, clothes, everything is on the precipice of skyrocketing. How do you sort of make sure that people understand that the only path available to Americans, the agency we have is political agency. We can make a different choice in 20 months.
I mean, I spend a lot of time talking to everyday people about how important it is for them to raise their voices against policies that are happening here in Washington that are hurting everyday Americans in very real ways. Some of the ways you just described, but there's been more. I mean, firing, veterans from the Veterans Affairs Department to serve our nation's veterans, that's happening. Closing Social Security offices, that's happening. Republicans in Congress today are considering a budget that would cut Medicaid and millions of people would lose their health insurance. That's happening. So I try to tell people it is so important for them to raise their voices and say, this is not what we asked for. This is not what we were looking for when we wanted a change in direction. If we want to strengthen the U.S. economy, you've got to put money back in the pockets of working people, not take money out of their pockets and deliver it to the billionaire class in the form of bigger tax breaks. And I do think, this is not over. This is a long process. Congress does have the power to rein this president in. Congress could take a different path, but people do need to raise their voices, and it doesn't have to happen in 20 months. It could happen right now. People do need to raise their voice, and I think it really does matter.
I've been asking Charlotte for 9 years about why the business community either seems excited about Trumpism, of the deregulation stripe, or the very shallow branding that he's somehow good for business. And more recently, over the last 8 months, since he's openly run as an autocratic figure, why they didn't participate as civic actors and speak out about what happens to industry and innovation and small business in an autocratic society. I never really got an answer other than fear and conservative thinking. What is happening behind the scenes now?
I think it's such a good question. One of the things that you've seen over the past few weeks and months is a tremendous capitulation of individual institutions, whether it's in universities, law firms, or members of the business community, in not wanting to stand up to Trump. And I think part of that has to do with just self-interest and a survival instinct. Trump has been very clear in the way that he's retaliating against people who speak out against him. Companies have a duty to their shareholders. They're making a bet that they think that having conversations behind the scenes, having a more velvet-glove approach, that this is the best way to deal with Trump. It wasn't that way in Trump 1. You saw after the Charlottesville protests, business leaders speak out very forcefully against statements that he made. They've taken a different tack in Trump 2. They're much more interested in working with him. I think a lot of that is explained by their continued hope that he gets a big tax bill through. So far, the promise of Trump, which, as you say, has been deregulation, has been tax reform, it has delivered. Those two things have not delivered, and what we have instead
administration this time. The head of the top intelligence gathering agency, Democratic member of the House, Jim Himes, will join us ahead on the ramifications of all that. And later in the broadcast, there are a lot of things Donald Trump could and should be doing today, but he has made the choice to golf with his rich Saudi-backed pals and attend a MAGA Inc. dinner. We'll show you what he skipped when he made that choice today. And Deadline White House continues after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Trains. Trains that use the power of Dell AI and Intel. Clearing the way so you arrive exactly where you belong.
I'm moderate to severe Crohn's disease.
And my ulcerative colitis symptoms kept me
Out of the picture. Now there's Sky Rizzy.
I've got places to go and I'm feeling free. Controlling my symptoms means everything to me.
Anyway, with that said, let's turn now to a little bit of those who are free, at least on some level, to be honest about this. Some Republicans are understandably already in a panic over Trump's stupid escalation of his dumb, boneheaded trade war, and they're coming out and speaking about it. Let's take a look.
Tariffs have also led to political decimation. McKinley most famously put tariffs on in 1890. They lost 50% of their seats in the next election. The Hobbs Smoothie put on their tariff in the early 1930s. We lost the House and the Senate for 60 years. So they're not bad economically, they're bad politically, and they're all long run, we're all dead. Short run matters too. Nobody knows the impact of these tariffs is going to be on the economy.
Anyone who says there may be a little bit of pain before we get things right need to talk about farmers who are one crop away from bankruptcy.
Okay, that is great to see them speaking out. I wish it was better people. They all suck. They're all ridiculous, but they're at least speaking out. I guess they feel insulated enough from the next election from Donald Trump's social media activity that they should say that, and they're not wrong. Last dude talking about like the farmers, they can't, yeah, an individual, a small farmer cannot just wait 2 years, wait 5 years as you negotiate or whatever because Canada and China are like, we're not buying your products anymore. Again, it would seem to be impossible that Trump could not have considered the effect of these boycotts. Not just the boycotts, but sort of effective boycotts when the reciprocal tariffs come in on our products. But we don't have billions of dollars. We don't have the capacity to go through 8 bankruptcies or whatever and just figure it out afterward. That's it for these businesses. That's it for these individuals, and he doesn't seem to care. And Rand Paul, by the way, he's there talking not just about the economic damage, which is real, but also the thing that I would have assumed would have stopped them from doing this, or at least this crazy version of it, which is the obvious political ramifications. I mean, you don't have to go all the way back to Smalley or whatever. We don't have to, do Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Yeah, you jack up prices on a populace that has already said prices are too high and we desperately need them to come down. And why the hell would you expect that would not hurt them? I just don't understand it. We've already seen the special elections from earlier this week. Districts in Florida went like 15 or more points towards the Democrats. You had the judicial election, despite all the spending of the billionaires, which we'll talk about more later on the show, shifting, 10, 15 points, something like that. How can you not see this? And again, good. I don't want them to see it. I don't want all of us to experience this economic hardship along the way, but it looks like we have no control over that. Not even the Senate seems to be able to do much about that at this point. Some Republicans did join with Democrats to do this vote to rebuke Trump on the tariff policy. It was 51 to 48. 48 wouldn't even stand up. They know how stupid this is. Every one of them does. The issue is
and in particularly does the House and the House Republicans effectively say, sir, you have lost your mind, you gotta knock this stuff off, and effectively have Mr. Trump blink. So if you've got a game of blink or a game of chicken going on, it's not really between the Fed and the Oval Office, it's the Oval Office in the House of Representatives.
All right. Paul Matilda, thank you.
Thank you.
How likely that is. Well, it's worth pointing out it's the
You've
first
seen a
time.
number of senators come out, Republican senators come out in the last 24 to 36 hours. And just the fact that there's even certain comments being made, it's my understanding, speaks to how much angst is probably happening behind closed doors. So we should keep an eye on that commentary.
Yeah, we said the House. The House is different.
He said the House, but I'm saying senators.
Pointing out it's the first time the Dow has fallen 1,500 plus points in back-to-back sessions. Well, our next guest says he's starting to get bullish. Jim Paulson, Paulson Perspectives author, joins us now. Jim, give us some good news. Why are you bullish?
Well, thanks for having me, John, on such an interesting day here. There's a lot of bad things going on. I totally agree with that, but there are some good things. And one of those things is we finally got to total panic stage. And that's often a sign that we're getting close to the bottom of the market. Even a few days ago, we had a lot of people that said they were bearish, but they still had a big commitment to the stock market. Well, I bet when those new numbers come out, we're going to see that equity exposure has come down a lot, cash has gone up a lot, holdings. In other words, it can't go down as much in the future simply because there's not as many people left to sell. That's a very good thing. Another good thing that's going on is even though the Fed is yet to ease, there's a lot of stimulus already being brought to bear on this situation. Bond yields have dropped almost 80 basis points from their highs just a couple months ago on the 10-year. Across most of the yield curve, they've come down a lot. That's a lot of easing already present. The dollar on real terms is down a fair amount here over the time. Again, another easing move that's been put in place. We've had a significant drop just in the last few days in commodity prices. Oil, I think, fell this morning on futures to like a 4-year low. Industrial commodity prices are in a plummet overall. Again, that's a stimulant coming to the situation here. So it's nice to see that happening. We don't have the Fed, but I think they're going to come sooner than we think.
Okay.
I look back. Yeah, go ahead.
You said close to total panic stage. Tell me how you're measuring panic versus rational reaction and how earnings guidance will factor in.
Well, I think that panic is partly a gut feel, John. There's no doubt about that because we've had a lot of these surveys that have been saying pessimism for quite a while. And I didn't really buy that, but just the behavior and the feel of the last couple of days is totally different. That's kind of what I was waiting for. And then if you want some quantitative evidence, you can look at the VIX blowing out today close to 50 and really ending the day on its highs, suggesting a fair amount of panic there going on overall. So I think that's, it's scary, but that's what brings about an end to the situations, in part because people have adjusted already and now their sentiment is so low, even bad news is better than fear, rather than bad news being even worse than they thought. And I think that changes the dynamics. Also, the stupidity of what we're doing becomes more obvious, if you will. The stupidity of enacting a massive tax increase on the entire global economy at this point doesn't make much sense. And I think it doesn't make much sense for the Fed to stubbornly not want to ease. I look back this morning at all the two-day movements since 1965 that dropped, at that point 9.3%. And there's only been about 7 other two-day periods like that. And every one of them, the Fed almost instantaneously eased. And in addition to that, look what the commentary is coming from some reliable sources. No inflation is seen in the bond market. Break-even rates are in free fall. No inflation is seen in the commodity market. I just mentioned they're plummeting. No inflation is seen in the inflation-sensitive stocks in the stock market. Energy stocks were terrible today, for example.
Yeah.
My point is that the Fed's going to lose many voices in its favor. I think it's going to be forced to ease.
So the fact that you've seen borrowing rates come down, we were just talking about it, and the positive impacts here it's had on home builder stocks today, for example. So the fact that borrowing rates are coming down, the fact that crude oil has come off to multi-year lows now, the fact that the dollar is weakened, and I realize we can debate why it's happening, but you're making the point, I'm just going to put a pointed angle on it here, that this is deflationary right now, and that those moves
moves in of themselves are stimulative? Is that the way to think about this?
Yes, they're absolutely, all those moves are stimulative. You think about it, you drop commodity prices. What are we worried about? What about prices going up? What's happening? Prices are coming down. I think this idea, the biggest fallacy in the public discussion, in my view, is somehow that tariffs are inflation. I think that's nonsense. Tariffs, bill was passed in 1930 and it led to the Great Depression. It was a deflationary event. If you put on these tariffs, they're going to slow the economy down and bring inflation down on so many other products, much more than the rise on specific tariff-related products. And so I just think, and that's what all the financial markets in unison at this moment are telling you loudly, is the deflationary event needs assistance.
Jim Paulson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Don't miss the CNBC special report on this market sell-off. It's going to be Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern as we get you set up for a new week of trading. We have a new alert on obesity drugs. Angelica Peebles has the details. Angelica.
Hey Morgan, so we just got word from CMS that it is going to drop the Biden administration's plan to allow Medicare to cover obesity drugs. That would have included Lilly Zepbound and Novo Nordisk Wegovy, semaglutide, as many people know it as. And so this is, of course, a big deal. Those companies had been hoping that the Trump administration would go ahead and implement this rule that would have allowed Medicare to cover these drugs, because right now Medicare cannot. So if you are covered by Medicare, you're a senior, you cannot get these drugs. You can get them if you have diabetes, but not for obesity. You can take a look. Shares of Novo and Lilly both down about 1% or so. So not a huge deal at this moment. At least the market's not taking it as such, but still not great news for them. Morgan.
All right, Angelica Peebles, thanks for bringing that to us. Well, today's plunge gaining steam in early pre-market hours after China slapped retaliatory tariffs of 34% on all U.S. goods imported into the country. On the other end of the spectrum, President Trump posting on Truth Social that he, quote, had a very productive call with a leader of Vietnam, boosting shares of retailers like Nike and Lululemon that have big supply chain footprints in that country. Other countries that have sought a diplomatic tone include Sri Lanka and Israel, according to Reuters reports. Let's bring in Megan Casella for more on the global response and what the White House is saying. Megan.
Hey, Morgan, lots of action today from foreign nations. We're seeing some countries acting defiant, vowing strong responses. China's, of course, being the most significant so far. One more to add to that list. The trade chief for the European Union says he spent 2 hours today talking with the U.S. Commerce Secretary and the trade representative. He says the EU is committed to meaningful negotiations, but it also is prepared to defend its interests. Now, what we don't know at this point is just how open the White House is to any of these negotiations. That post that you mentioned from the president about his discussion with Vietnam offered the strongest sign yet that there is potentially some room for deal making. It shows that Trump himself spoke with at least one world leader today about the tariffs, but it also came just a couple of hours after the president posted to kick off his day that his, quote, policies would never change. So some mixed messaging on that front about where we go from here. All of this happening, guys, with the president down in Florida. He left Washington midday yesterday, less than 24 hours after rolling out his tariff plan. He spent about 6 hours today at his golf club. You can see in this footage here, that's him leaving just in the last hour. The White House has already said we will not see the president again today as he heads to a fundraising dinner tonight for his super PAC. Guys.
Megan Casella, thank you. Up next, retail investors have been buying the dips. But could that actually be a sign that the bottom isn't yet in? We're going to discuss.
Plus, Council on Foreign Relations President Emeritus Richard Haass tells us why he thinks China could end up being a big winner from the tariffs. And Tesla falling more than 10% today, now down more than 50% from its 52-week high, hit back in December. We'll be right back.
The road to opportunity is often the road overlooked. At Enterprise Mobility, we guide companies to unique solutions from our team of mobility experts. Because we believe the more ways we all have to move forward, the further we'll all go.
The next series of the world's first downside protected Bitcoin ETFs with 100
90 and 80% protection levels through our proven protection strategy. Elements. Today for tomorrow.
A major motion picture. An evolution in customer experience. A game-changing approach to golf. Behind them all, advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business. Disney chose T-Mobile to power real-time collaboration between remote production hubs. T-Mobile fuels Tractor Supply stores nationwide with 5G internet. And innovates with PGA of America to elevate the game. Business goes further with T-Mobile for Business.
Is this how you're hoping to retire? Well, hope isn't a good retirement strategy. You've worked for a comfortable retirement for years. Now you need to plan for retirement income. Learn ways to avoid common mistakes, like being too conservative or not setting retirement goals. Have someone on your side to keep you on track.
Call for Fisher's Comfortable Retirement Kit with the help you need to make your retirement a success, including the investment.
Steinbeck wrote The Grapes of Wrath.
From the most trusted journalists at Comedy Central, it's America's only source for news. This is The Daily Show with your host, Jon Stewart.
Economist Orrin Cass is going to be here later to discuss tariffs. You're going to have a conservative economist bucking laissez-faire. Just f***ing watch it. But first, we're going to check in with our good friend, democracy. Going to give him the old turn your head and cough. How's democracy doing?
In some of his strongest comments yet, President Trump says he's considering his options to serve a third term in office, a breach of the Constitution's two-term limit for presidents.
I'm sorry, considering the option? What are you trying to order off menu from the Constitution? Oh yeah, I see you got what do you got? 2 terms here. But can I get it animal style? What are you going to do with a third term? How does that work exactly?
In a phone call with NBC, Trump saying, quote, there are methods which you could do it, including possibly urging his vice president, J.D. Vance, to run and then cede power back to Trump. The president saying that's one method, but that there are others too.
Yes. There are other methods. You tried one a few years ago. There are other methods for staying in power beyond when you are legally allowed to be there. Historically, some of them involve catapults. Although maybe Trump has something more creative in mind with the Vance thing. Have you guys heard of the movie Face Off? Yeah, so here's how it's gonna work. Trump will watch that movie as the military seizes power. Like, what the f***? I'm sure at which point Chuck Schumer will say, I will allow it. Because in the third term, we think his popularity will go down to 30. So aside from the president saying, I'm not leaving, is there any other image of the shambolic state of our democracy, perhaps something that looks like what you might get if you fed the destruction of democracy into an AI meme generator? Oh, right, Elon Musk, okay. The richest and most fertile man in the world went to Wisconsin, where he came out in a cheese hat before giving million-dollar checks to voters in an effort to influence the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. Hey, you know what that's about? You know what that's about, Elon? Their culture is not your costume, Musk. Their people... do not appropriate their dairy chapeaus. You can really get a sense of the fraying of our democracy by tracing the arc of its symbolic headwear. It's still a tricorner, but it's not the same. Meanwhile, the process of streamlining our beautiful democracy continues apace. And a couple of months into Trump's second of his, let's say, 4 to 7 terms, he continues to live up to his vaunted apprentice catchphrase, "You're fired."
More than 1,300 workers now fired at the Department of Education.
The IRS beginning to lay off more than 6,000 employees.
The Social Security Administration will cut 7,000 jobs.
The U.S. Postal Service will trim its workforce by 10,000.
HHS will be dropping around 20,000 workers.
The Department of Veterans Affairs looking to cut 80,000 jobs.
In the administration's defense, those veterans shouldn't have been having affairs in the first place. That's on them. And by the way, do we need a department for that? The layoffs have been harsh, unpredictable, and needless to say, the mainstream media has been outraged.
So what's the end game here? Killing American jobs?
They're risking her